بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, there is a narration collected by both Bukhari and Muslim on the authority of Muadh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. Muadh ibn Jabal. Muadh ibn Jabal, his kunya is Abu Abdul Rahman. He was one of the younger companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's an Ansari, so he joined the ranks of Islam near or after Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Medina. And in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَأَعْلَمُ أُمَّتِي بِالْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامِ مُعَاذُ بْنُ جَبَلٍ. He said, the most knowledgeable about halal and haram amongst my nation is Muadh ibn Jabal, radiyallahu anhu. And this is an incredible title for Muadh because he died in his early 30s, radiyallahu anhu. He actually was sent by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his final year, in the 9th year after Hijrah to Yemen, to call the people of Yemen to Islam, to act as a teacher and a judge there. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam personally escorted him to the outskirts of Medina when he sent him and dispatched him to Yemen. And he told Muadh, you will likely come back to Medina and not find me, meaning that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew that this was his last year, and Muadh knew that this was the last time he was going to see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so when he came back from Yemen, he came back to Medina in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu anhu. And he was originally placed in position in the, you could say, the cabinet or in the, leadership of Medina along with Umar ibn al-Khattab. But Muadh continuously complained to Umar that it was too painful and too sad to be in Medina without the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he did everything but beg Umar to please send him somewhere else. So Umar radiyallahu anhu allowed him to go to Sham. Sham meaning Syria, and this was the front lines of the Muslim empire's expansion at the time. Muadh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu arrived in Sham at around the age 34, and then not even a year later, the great plague of Amwas came through and swept through Sham, and Muadh was claimed as a victim of that plague at the age of 35 or thereabouts. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that Muadh ibn Jabal is going to be resurrected a stone's throw ahead of the rest of the scholarship of Islam. That on the Day of Judgment, when Allah resurrects the scholars and puts them all together in each other's company, Muadh ibn Jabal will be at the helm, and he will be alone ahead of them, a stone's throw in proximity due to his level of knowledge and stature with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the things that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught to this young man? This man who would later become the great Muadh ibn Jabal, what were the kind of teachings that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spent his time teaching him? Was he having long discussions and discourses on abstract philosophical points of existentialism? Was that what he was talking to him about, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? One of the most prominent narrations that the Prophet taught Muadh ibn Jabal is that he said to him, Ya Muadh, أتدري ما حق الله على العباد وما حق العباد على الله? He said, "O Muadh, do you know what the rights of Allah over his servants are, over his slaves are, and the rights of his slaves upon Allah?" Muadh responded, "Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam." Allah and his messenger know best. Allah and his messenger know best is a term that we use during the Prophet Muhammad's lifetime. After his passing, alayhi salatu wassalam, we say, Allahu a'lam. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam responded and said, Haqqullahi ala al-ibad an ya'buduhu wa la yushriku bihi shay'a. Wa haqqul ibadi ala Allah alla yu'adhiba man la yushriku bihi shay'a. He said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the rights of Allah over his slaves are that they worship him alone and not associate another unto him in their worship of he. And the rights of the servants that he has given them over himself is that, or upon himself, is that he not punish those who do not associate any partners unto he. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the essence of the agreement and allegiance between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his servants. This is the essence of Islam, the worship of Allah alone without any partners. The reason that we exist. These are the kinds of things that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught his companions. Simple yet deep. No matter how deep in thought you follow these concepts, they will always be ahead of you. No matter how high you climb the mountains of these concepts, when you reach the top, you will find these verses of the Quran, these narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the top of these mountains already waiting for you there. There's no way to push the envelope of the Quran and Sunnah. It is always a step ahead of us, no matter how deep our thought is. And this was how he taught the companions, not fancy talk and rhetoric and exercises of futility and using big fancy words. This wasn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's da'wah. His da'wah was very simple, very straightforward. He taught the companions things that they could keep in mind as they read the Quran. And then he let the Quran speak for itself. He got out of the way and let the Quran speak to the people. And so they would understand the Quran and hear it and read it with the lens of the rights of Allah over his slaves are that they worship him alone and not associate any other unto him in their worship of he. And the rights of the slaves that he has placed upon himself for them is that he not punish them if they follow through with that. And then you read the Quran and you understand that at the heart of every verse, at the heart of every command, at the heart of every prohibition, at the heart of every guidance lies the worship of Allah alone without any partners. And that if you fulfill this in this spirit, Allah will not punish you. This is how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam produced the likes of Muadh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bimanni wa karami wa judih that he guide us to the truth, grant us the insight to recognize it for what it is and the courage to follow it. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
Where this Jabal came in his name?
Muadh ibn Jabal,
Yeah.
his father's name